Hola a todos. Vamos a aprender sobre lección 1 de unidad 3, números más de 30. Just going to warn you all, I've had a few too many Tootsie Rolls, so I'll try my best to talk at a normal speed here, but I figured you guys are probably going to throw the double time on me anyways, so Tootsie Rolls and double time on YouTube. This could be fun. All right, so numbers 31 to 100. We're going to look at those first. So if you've been wondering how you might do bigger numbers by the end of today, in theory, you will be able to go up to 999,999,999. It's going to take a little bit of practice. The bigger numbers get fairly complex. They're going to look really big and intimidating, but if you break them down, they're not so bad. They're just as intimidating in Spanish as it is in English for somebody learning English. They just get big. But first off, we're going to focus on 31 through 100 here, and there are some patterns that you will see on these. So starting at 31 here, you get a new pattern. So up through 29, you've had the words written out in one word. So 29, all one word. Starting in 31, they're going to break it out into three words. It's going to be the decade number, and then an and then the single digit number. So 31 is 31, 32 is 32, you have 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, y 39. Now, what gets interesting here is this pattern is going to continue all the way up to 100. So starting at 31, it's going to always be the decade number plus an and then the single digit number. So all you really need, you already know the single digit numbers, you really just need to learn the decade numbers. And once you have those decade numbers down, you can add the single digits. So let's just look at 40 through 49 again. And you will see 40 through 49, you've got 40, then 41, 42, 43, and so on, all the way up to 49. Follows that same pattern. And you'll see then we can add on our other decade numbers, and it works the same way. So 50, you have 50. You see a couple of examples there of 51 and 52. It follows the same pattern, 51, 52. You've got 60 is 60. You've got 70, which is 70. You've got 80, 80, 90, 90. And 100 is 100 or ciento, which we'll talk about the difference of those. You'll see I threw in a couple other numbers in there just to show you that that pattern does continue. Decade number, the and then the single digit number. So we've got the single digit numbers separated out from the decade number with the and, right? That's the pattern. Now, like before, numbers ending in uno, so in this case, we've got 31, 41, 51, 61, and so on, change to un before masculine nouns and una before feminine nouns. So we had that before, that pattern is going to continue. And also you'll see 100, you have 100 and you have ciento. So they use 100 for 100 exactly. Once it's bigger than 100, they will switch to ciento. So 100 is only used on one case, when it's 100 exactly. 101, 101. So it's just for 100 exactly. So are you excited? That's what that says. ¿Están ustedes emocionados? Yo estoy emocionado. I'm excited. Like I said, too many Tootsie Rolls. All right, anyway, it's always my favorite time of year. When my dad would come home from hunting season when I was a kid, he would always have leftover Tootsie Rolls. It was always his hunting candy. I had the express privilege of bringing home a bunch of extra Tootsie Rolls this year after my hunting season. My kids also happen to love that tradition. And of course, I've got plenty of leftovers as well. All right, so a few examples. ¿Cuántos libros hay en la clase? How many books are there in the class? Hay 35 libros en la clase. There are 35 books in the class. ¿Cuántos estudiantes hay en Español 1 en CCHS? Hay 52 estudiantes en Español 1. So that'd be 52. That's less than what we've got. We would have something like 108, which we have not gotten to yet. There are 41 boys. And here you'll notice it's a one that's going to end with uno. So hay 41 muchachos, or chicos. You'll see there the uno changes to un in front of a masculine noun. There are 71 girls. Hay 71 chicas. There aren't 100 chairs. No hay 100 sillas. There you'll see it's 100 exactly. So we use 100. Are there 95 cousins in the family? ¿Hay 95 primos en la familia? All right. So that's going to be the backbone for everything that we do now on numbers greater than 100. So really with that one, we have our single digits down. We have through 30 down. We've learned that before. Now what we really need to do is we need to make sure to learn those decade numbers. So the 40, 40, 50, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 or ciento. Because that's going to form, everything's going to be built off that. And then once we have those down, and you will need to memorize them and these, you'll need to know then the century numbers, because they're going to be another building block. So here you'll see for starting at 100, we will just add to that. So 101 would be 101, 102, 102, 103, 104, 137, 137, 199, 199. So we can just take and add on the stuff from the decade numbers. And we can do that with any of the century numbers. So 200 is going to be 200 or 200. Do notice there is a gender difference there, which we'll talk about in a minute. I'm not going to always say the feminine option, but realize with these, if there is that /as, it has that feminine option. So you've got 300, 400, and you'll see here there is a bit of a pattern. So ciento is 100 when it's not exactly 100. All of these century names, you've got 200. It's kind of like 2 100s, 3 100s, 4 100s. At 500, however, that pattern is somewhat broken. You get 500 or 500. This one is not 500, which would follow the pattern. So this one is irregular and not following that pattern. It is related to the number 15. That's how I remember it. It's spelled, the start of it's spelled similar to 15, which is involves fives. And then you've got 600, which follows that pattern again, 6 100s. Then you get 700, which this one does not follow the pattern. It's not 700. So it's a bit irregular. This one I remember based off of the word for 70, which is 70. Similar to that, the start of it. Then we get 800, which is 800. And then we get 900, which is 900, which is also irregular. It reminds me of 90, which is the word for 90. So you've got the odd ones starting at 500. 500, 700, 900 are not following the pattern. The others, it's going to be like taking the single digit number 2 and then hundreds. So 200, 2 100s, 3 100s, 4 100s, and so on. All right, then we get to 1,000. And one thing that's interesting here that you should note, in Spanish, they actually will use the decimal point instead of a comma. And they will actually use a comma when we use decimal points. We're not going to really deal with the decimal points too much, but do notice when you see the 1.000, that is their word for, or number for 1,000. So what is 1,000? 1,000 is the word mil, which is a little confusing. It sounds like a million, but mil is their word for 1,000. 1,100, for example, would be 1,100. 1,100. 2,000 is going to be 2,000. 5,000, 5,000. 100,000, 100,000. 200,000, 200,000, or 200,000. It has that other feminine option. You've got 555,000, 555,000. So you can see how these can all be built on each other. So like we could have 555,200, 555,200. So these can be built on top of each other. These are building blocks you can kind of mix and match around as you need to. Then we've got a million, which is un millón. And I'll explain the day here in a minute. But un millón is 1 million. And then you've got 8 million would be 8 millones. So notice there the millón changes to millones with plural. Now, a couple things here. Numbers 200 through 999 have to agree in gender with the noun they modify. So 200 or 200, for example. Now, while mil doesn't become plural, it doesn't turn to miles or something like that, millón becomes plural, as I mentioned, becomes millones. Also, slightly odd, but you'll see 1,000 is just mil, not un mil, where a million is un millón, not just millón. So 1,000 is mil, not un mil. A million is un millón, not just millón. And also when un millón or millones is followed directly by a noun, now this is only if there's other parts of a number afterwards, I don't worry about it. But if it's right afterwards by a noun, they will typically put a day between the number and the noun. So like, for example, something like 8 million cars. 8 millones de carros. If it was 8,375,923 cars, they could put it there, but they often drop it. And as mentioned, Spanish uses periods instead of commas and vice versa. And then this is really a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. When you're building these with these building blocks, they will only use the and between decade numbers and single digit numbers. So you'll see there on that chart, 101 is 101. It's not 101. That is between a century number and a single digit number. No and. You've got 200,003, let's say. 200,003. Between a decade and single digit, you get the and. It's the only time you have the and. All right, so a few examples. 345. Let's see how these work. So we'll start small here, and I would say vast majority of words are going to be in the 0 to 1,000 range. That's just in real life. We don't use much bigger numbers than that most of the time. So 345, we've got 345. So the 300, 300, 40 is the 40, and 5, notice the and between the decade and single digit only. 597,123. This gets a little bit bigger. So 597,000. 597,123. Now, one thing that is worth keeping in mind, these can start getting hard to keep track of. One thing I like to think of is each dot, or in English, the comma, will represent a word like mil or millones or millón. So you've got the first dot, wherever that is, it's going to be this mil. You've got a second dot, that's going to be the millones. So 597, 500, 500, 90, 90, y siete, and 7, 1,000. That's that dot, mil. 123, 100, it's the 123, 23. Now let's get it up into the millions. 802,234,989. You'll see, and you're welcome to do this too, how I have made each chunk bold. You've got part underlined. If you want to do that, that's fine. Another way people sometimes find these easy to write when they're starting out is to make each grouping its own line. So 802, we start out with that. 802 is 800, 2 millones. The millones lines up with the millions dot here. Notice there's no and between these because we've got a hundreds century number in a single digit. Then we've got 234,000. 234, 200, 200, 34, 34. The thousand dot there is this mil. And we've got 989, 900, 900, 89, 89. There are 454 pens. Now this, we've actually got a noun in there that we have to worry about some gender matching. Remember, we got to gender match our 100s, the 200 or 200, 300, 300, etc., as well as we have any ones that end with uno, we have to gender match. This doesn't have any unos, but it does have hundreds. So 454 pens. Hay 454 plumas. So I use plumas there for pen, so that's feminine. So we use cientas, the feminine there. So that's the 454, 54. There are 723,502,081 erasers. So here we've got to think about gender matching with the hundreds as well as with the unos, the ones. Hay 723 millones, so 723 million. So that's the million comma right there. So 723 million. There's the million dot or comma. In Spanish, should be a dot. 502,500, 502. It's the 502, no and because it's between a century and single digit. 1,000, that's the thousand comma. And then 81, 81 borradores. Now, notice that borradores is masculine, so we use un, as well as we leave them all as 500, 700, and so on. All right, that is the end, el fin. This will take a lot of practice. This does not come easy. I really try to focus keeping it in small, manageable chunks. Knowing through the 1,000, so knowing your decade numbers, got to get those down real fast and get those century numbers down. And then remembering 1,000 is mil and million is either millón or millones. Then if you take those pieces, you can use them as long as you keep things in small perspectives. Remembering each dot or comma is one of the words, either mil or millón, millones. That should help. So for now, just sit on it. We'll work on it tomorrow in class, as some of our homework will be practicing this. El fin.